Fellowship greeting time. This is when we say hello to our visitors and other members with whom we are not well acquainted. And you will have some time to do that. And at some appropriate time, I will sound the gong, and then you will please return to your seats. So, talk among yourselves. Okay. Today, I have a few words about the prelude, if you'll indulge me. I love to get the story behind some of the music. And this piece of music continues something that we had several weeks ago relating to a love story. Clara Weck was a woman with whom Robert Schumann was in love. Her father couldn't stand Robert Schumann, and he was her teacher. And but Robert was in love with her, and when Clara came of age, she just married him, which was great. A couple of weeks ago, we had a piece of music called Dedication by Schumann, and it was a love letter that he wrote to her. Sasha Carlson played it. Today, we welcome Bill Dawson, who was trained at the Curtis Institute by none other than Rudolf Sirkin. And he told me yesterday that when he took his lessons at Curtis, you were the first student, and the second student behind you was Peter Sirkin, so, who became a great specialist in Bach. Anyway, this piece of music is called Träumerei. It means dreams. And it was written when Robert Schumann was very interested in Clara, and he composed 13 parts to this piece. It's called Kindersäden. It was written about children, but not particularly for children. And this piece, to start our service, is called Träumerei. It's the most popular of the Kindersäden pieces. The opening words today. We are of the stars, the dust of explosions cast across space. We are of the earth. We breathe and live in the breath of ancient plants and beasts. We are a tiny part of the vast universe. Over the last 13.5 billion years, we have evolved into a state of awareness of its own nature, its own story, and its origin. We gather together this morning members of the great circle of humanity, which has been in existence for less than 200,000 years. May we recall in gratitude all that has given us birth. May we be glad for life, for it gives us the chance to love and to work and to play and to look at the stars. And now, the chalice lighting, which we will read in unison as my colleague Richard lights this chalice. He's looking for an instrument,
We have
a
the
fire.
usual problem of lighting.
Here we go. Okay, we shall read here. We light this chalice as a symbol of our connection to the stars and the sky, and as a symbol of our dependence on the warmth and light of the sun. We light this chalice as a symbol of our own bright place in the universe. And now we turn to hymn number 163, For the Earth Forever Turning. Each Sunday, we set aside a special time for the congregation members to share their special joys and sorrows, to be in the embrace of this caring community. First, we begin with sharing our sorrows. If there's anyone with a sorrow or concern weighing heavily on your heart, we invite you to raise your hand or come forward as you wish, and a microphone will be brought to you. No.
Good morning. My name is Tony Fisher. I have the great joy of being here this morning with my wife Ann, and I'm looking forward to this coming year as your new minister, and I'm excited to be present for our worship services this week and next, and as I say, brimming with joy for being here this morning.
Anyone else with a joy or a sorrow? Well, that's a big joy. You got your hands full, Tony. But it will be fun. And now, let's see, time for the offering. If I can find my notes here. This is our house, and it welcomes you to meet your needs in so many important ways. By passing the offering plate today, you have an opportunity to do your part in keeping this house strong and viable and an important repository for free religious ideas. So I urge you to give as you are able, and remember, when you're reaching for your wallet, we Unitarians do accept all denominations. Now I can find the place. Here we go. See, that only took a minute. Before I do my reading for the meditation, you're going to have to indulge me because there's another story here about Clara Schumann coming up. It's in the meditation music. It's part of this love triangle between Clara Schumann, Robert Schumann, and Johannes Brahms. Clara eventually married Robert Schumann, and Brahms had a really serious crush on her as well. When he was 60 years old, he wrote this Opus 118, from which we'll hear a piece of music here. He was 60. He dedicated this to Clara Schumann, and Brahms died 4 years later at the age of 64. And the remarkable thing to me is that Clara Schumann was an inspiration catalyzing some of the greatest musical compositions by two of the greatest composers of the 19th century. So here is just one little snippet, thanks to Clara, I guess, in a way, that Johannes Brahms wrote. And it will follow my meditation reading. And today, if I can find it, today we consider this is written by Wendell Berry in a setting where we find spiritual comfort enfolded in the arms of the natural world. And this poem is called The Peace of Wild Things. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things, who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For the time I rest in the grace of the world and am free. for the reading. This is kind of adapted from Maimonides and also a book by, I forget his name. He's a cosmologist, just wrote on it's called Where Things Began. So I mentioned two views on the creation of the universe. One is ancient and one is modern. In the writings for the Perplexed, from which Dick Mackin draws much of his sermon, the Jewish scholar of the 12th century, Maimonides, takes the Mosaic position that the entire universe was brought into existence by God after having been purely and absolutely non-existent. God is the only external thing, and before creation had existed alone, he had existed alone. According to Maimonides' view, creation ex nihilo does not mean that something came from nothing, but insists that God does not need a material cause in creating. Maimonides speculated that time itself is one of these creations, a consequence of creation. It's not eternal. He was prescient in a lot of things that the physicists of this last century discovered, actually. And in that regard, in the modern view of Einstein and a colleague, George Lemaitre, who was a Jesuit, cosmologist, mathematician, and physicist, George Lemaitre said that the creation of the universe, that is matter, time, space, and gravity, began from a singular point in which all matter of energy was confined. Lemaitre proposed this idea in 1927, and Einstein thought he was a great mathematician but was a poor physicist. But 2 years later, University of Chicago astronomer Edwin Hubble's observations clearly demonstrated that the universe was expanding, consistent with Lemaitre's theory. And this raised the question of expanding from what? And in 1949, the term Big Bang was used to help us visualize what physicists and mathematicians were proposing. There was no one present at the time of the proposed Big Bang. However, today we are able to study and analyze light and radiations emitted almost 13.5 billion years ago, just following the big event. Light is the messenger to inform us about the physics of the beginning of the universe. And these physical findings and mathematical interpretations have been most helpful. The most recent revelation was the one from the telescope in the Antarctic, where they discovered what is called inflation. I won't get into that, but it was how in 1/1,000,000,000 of a trillionth of a trillionth of a second after the Big Bang, everything in space kind of took its position and continued to expand. What science does not so far reveal is the rationale for the beginning of the universe. This is why the writings of scholars like Maimonides, Plato, Aristotle, etc., continue to be of great interest. And now we'll turn to hymn number 121, We'll Build a Land.
Good morning, everyone. Before I start, let me give you a little background about how I arrived at my topic. When I was thinking about what I would say that would be of general interest, I thought, well, what if someone came to me and they said, where do we come from? Who are we? And why is our country in the condition that it is now? So over 18 minutes, I will discuss all of these topics. Reverend Lynn told me that was the maximum length that a sermon should go. So, A Guide for the Perplexed, as has been mentioned, was a title of a work by Moses Maimonides. This is not a talk about Moses Maimonides, even though I will mention him, but it moves on to those larger and broader subjects. Every person in each generation is confronted anew by the problem of trying to explain the forces and events that impact their lives. How does one make sense of it all? Who are we, and how did we get here? What's driving the politics and social changes that we see happening around us? Why is the national mood so sour? Why are so many Americans angry and resentful? Through the ages, people have tried to analyze and explain what is happening around them by using the tools available at the time. One such man was Moses Maimonides, a medieval Spanish Sephardic Jewish philosopher, physician, rabbi, and Torah scholar who wrote a famous work, A Guide for the Perplexed, that I've taken as the title for my sermon. Maimonides was born in Cordoba in Spain in 1138 at the end of the golden age of Jewish culture in the Iberian Peninsula. This was the period of the convivencia when Muslims, Christians, and Jews lived in relative harmony with each other, sharing in an inclusive and intellectually vibrant society. A Guide for the Perplexed was originally written in Arabic and only later translated into Hebrew. This period of tolerance ended with when a change of rulers forced conversion on the Jews. Like many of his co-religionists, Maimonides chose exile, settling first in Morocco and then in Egypt, where he died in Cairo in 1204. Maimonides used both religion and science to explain what was happening around him. As a religious Jew, he was steeped in the knowledge of the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, and the voluminous writings on Jewish law. But religion wasn't his only guide. The Arabs had translated Greek texts on philosophy and science, which Maimonides had avidly read in his youth. He was particularly impressed by the works of Aristotle, the world's first real scientist, who lived in the 4th century before Christ, and wrote on a wide variety of subjects, including physics, biology, zoology, logic, ethics, politics, and government. Aristotle was too important to ignore, and Maimonides, in his work, tried to show the compatibility of science and philosophy with religion. This conflict between religion and science continues down to the present day. In general, the ancient Greeks were free to explore intellectual pursuits without religious interference. Many of their gods led scandalous lives and certainly didn't provide examples of good behavior. The Greek philosophers worked out for themselves, without any sort of divine guidance, how man should live. They believed that man was the measure of all things. Various schools of philosophy developed, but in general they believed that the unexamined life was not worth living and that man was responsible for his own fate. This tension between religion and science, between God and man, underlies Western civilization, giving us both our cultural richness and numerous areas of conflict. Out of the rich stew of Middle Eastern religious traditions, circumcision from Egypt, angels from Persia, and creation and flood narratives from Sumeria, came Judaism and its offshoot, Christianity. The ancient Greeks provided us with more practical things, one could say the good things in our lives: science, technology, mathematics, theater, art, architecture, sports, and democracy, to name a few. It's not by chance that many of our government buildings are modeled after Greek temples. In everyday life, we owe a great debt to the ancient Greeks. To find out who we are, let's go back to the very beginning, to the Big Bang, to the start of the universe. Through patient observation, advanced mathematics, and cutting-edge physics, scientists have developed the Big Bang theory, which is the prevailing cosmological model for the early development to the universe. At the beginning, all matter in the universe was contained in a single point. Bill has mentioned 13.5 billion years. I mean, my research showed 13.8 billion years. Science is what's 300 million years. It's around that time. So I'm going to use 13.8, which is what I found. And the initial universe was very dense and hot. But as it cooled and expanded, great clouds of primordial elements, especially hydrogen, coalesced through gravity to form stars and galaxies. Our planet, Earth, is about 14.5 billion years old, so we're only a third as old as the universe. Or looked at another way, there was no Earth for the first 9 billion years of the universe. The Earth, like everything else in the universe, was formed by collisions of giant clouds of materials, with gravity slowly gathering gas and particles together to form our planet. If you're looking for a miracle, just look around you. All of us and everything in the world is made up of stardust, a material originally brought here from outer space. Earth is a tiny planet in a corner of one small galaxy. There are 400 billion stars in our galaxy. That's billion with a B. Many with planets circling them. And there are 100 billion other galaxies. The universe, of which we are a very insignificant part, is expanding at an increasing rate, with all the galaxies rushing away from each other. Billions of years in the future, Earth's nighttime sky will be totally black, with no stars visible because other galaxies will be too far away to be seen. Dark energy, a mysterious form of energy that fills space everywhere, is the force driving the galaxies apart. Scientists who study space have also posited the idea that there were other Big Bangs. Why should ours have been the only one? They created other universes that we know nothing about. The possibilities are endless. As the Earth cooled and an atmosphere formed, plant and animal life developed, first in the water and then on land, leading eventually, after billions of years, to modern humans. The earliest members of our genus, which is Homo, appeared in Africa about 2.5 million years ago. Following millions of years of evolution, the first anatomically modern humans appeared about 200,000 years ago. Modern humans live solely in Africa, principally in open savanna environments, until 60,000 years ago. This is the date for the earliest successful out-of-Africa migration, the earliest migration with living descendants, and those descendants, of course, are us. Some scientists believe that only a few people left Africa in a single migration that went on to populate the rest of the world. Possibly as few as 150 to 1,000 people crossed the Red Sea to the Arabian Peninsula at a narrow point. The bottom line is that genetically we're all Africans, and Africa was our original homeland. Variations in skin color can be explained by vitamin D and skin cancer. Those of us who aren't black have lost our pigmentation. The body makes vitamin D, the sunshine vitamin, when the skin is directly exposed to the sun. Very few foods naturally contain vitamin D, so having a fair skin in more northern latitudes where sunshine is limited at certain times of year would be beneficial. Conversely, having the dark pigment melanin in the skin is a natural defense against the sun's rays in tropical areas and helps prevent skin cancer. Many of us, including myself, have experienced at firsthand the danger of being fair-skinned in a place with abundant sunshine like Florida. I had my latest batch of skin cancers removed a month ago. Nature did not intend for me to live here. These amazing scientific discoveries about the origins of the universe, the formation and development of the earth, and the evolution of man would no doubt have delighted Aristotle, who would have had no need to justify them against some religious text. But they most likely would have presented a problem for Maimonides, who would have had to try to square religion with science. This problem exists for a good part of the American people. A recent Pew Research poll found that 33% of the public believes that humans and other living things have existed in their present form since the beginning of time. Flying in the face of all scientific evidence, creationism remains alive and well in this country. One has to ask oneself, what are these people thinking? Where are they getting their information? And how can they be so uninformed? The coming of the information age and the accompanying globalization of trade and manufacturing is proving as disruptive to society and the economy as the arrival of the industrial age 2 centuries ago. Whole new groups of winners and losers are being created. Capital is valued over labor, and wealth is increasingly going to those at the very top of the economic pyramid. In the first 3 years of the recovery after the Great Recession, 95% of income gains went to the top 1% of earners. Inequality is increasing as middle-class jobs are sent overseas, where wages are lower or eliminated due to technology. Great numbers of Americans live in economic insecurity and wonder why their lives are so precarious. Many people live paycheck to paycheck, unable to put anything aside. In this already poisonous atmosphere, we have a Republican Party moving steadily to the right, convinced that all government is bad, that taxes should never be raised, and almost all regulations should be removed. Free markets should prevail, with the rewards going to the already rich at the top of the economy. The jobs that have been created after the end of the Great Recession don't, in general, pay as well as those that have been lost, and the trickle-down effect doesn't work very well. Tensions and strains within society are going to continue to grow as people don't see their lives improving. To really understand America, one has to consider race. Slavery is the original sin of our country, and its effects are seen around us every day in the form of unequal housing, education, and employment, as well as the mass incarceration of African American men. After the American Revolution, the southern states would never have agreed to form the Union if slavery weren't allowed. And it took a bloody 4-year civil war to end human enslavement in our country. But the Civil War never really ended because many Americans, particularly in the South, refused to accept the former slaves and their descendants as fellow citizens with equal rights and responsibilities. The long, shameful period of legal segregation ended with the civil rights legislation of the 1960s. Now Republican governors and legislatures in several states are attempting to chip away at these gains by making access to the polls more difficult for African Americans. The election of Barack Hussein Obama as the first black president, though his mother was white, drove some people right over the edge, causing a great upwelling of hate and anger, remember the birthers, that led to the formation of the Tea Party, which is well on the way to capturing control of the Republican Party. Shortly after President Obama was elected, I began to see bumper stickers that said, "Take back our country," or my personal favorite, "Take back our country from them." Well, we know who them is. What these people don't know or refuse to admit is that their country isn't coming back. The United States is well on the way to becoming a multiracial, multi-ethnic, multicultural nation in which no one group will have a majority. Asians are now the fastest growing racial group in our country, and the Hispanic population is increasing rapidly. Any political party that doesn't adapt to these new realities will eventually be swept away. Against this background of political turmoil and economic change, we have deep divisions in society over such issues as abortion, gun rights, gay marriage, and contraception. And a right-wing majority on the Supreme Court is increasingly making its presence felt. The conservative justices, Roberts and Alito, appointed by George W. Bush's administration, will be W's lasting gift to the nation. This radical Supreme Court has ruled that corporations are actually people. What would the founders have made of that? And now in the recent ruling in the Hobby Lobby case, the court has determined that corporations can have religious beliefs that must be honored. So-called people of faith, many of whom seem very bigoted to me, will be pressing for all sorts of exemptions to support their particular prejudices. The floodgates have been opened. So this is where we find ourselves at this point in time. It's not a very pretty picture. As you contemplate our country's many social and economic problems and its dysfunctional politics, just remember that you're genetically an African made out of stardust, walking around on a 4.5 billion-year-old planet in a universe that started with the Big Bang 13.8 billion years ago. That's who we are. Stay strong and stay grounded. Thank you. Okay, we will now sing the next hymn, which is 318.
Our hearts and points
The benediction comes from a Pete Seeger song, To My Old Brown Earth. Guard well our human chain. Watch while you keep it strong, as long as sun will shine. And keep this home, keep pure and sweet and green. For now I'm yours and you are also mine. Thank you very much.
For their proceeds,